The alien fleet arrived without drama, which should have been the first warning. No blazing weapons fire. No threats broadcast across open channels. Just a clean, mathematically perfect emergence from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol perimeter, exactly 3 light minutes outside the defensive exclusion zone. 12 vessels, identical in mass and configuration, arranged in a formation so precise it looked artificial even by alien standards. To the Ketheri Directorate, precision was culture. Excess was weakness. Emotion was inefficiency. They expected fear. What they received was silence. Admiral Elias Rourke stood on the command deck of the UNV Resolute, hands folded behind his back, eyes fixed on the tactical display. He was 6'2", gray at the temples, spine straight despite a lifetime of acceleration stress and combat injuries. The younger officers around him waited for orders that did not come. That, too, was deliberate. "Confirm their vector," Rourke said calmly. "Confirmed, sir," the navigation officer replied. "Holding position. Weapons cold. Shields at passive resonance." Rourke nodded once. The Ketheri were not attacking because they did not believe they needed to. Their doctrine was built on inevitability. Appear. Demonstrate superiority. Offer terms. Enforce compliance. Every species they had encountered followed the same pattern when faced with overwhelming force. Panic first. Negotiation second. Capitulation third. Humans, the Ketheri believed, would be no different. The Ketheri flagship opened a tight beam transmission. No encryption. No posturing. Just data. A single alien figure appeared on the main display, tall and narrow, encased in lead cybernetics that glowed faintly along its spine. Its eyes were black and unblinking, its voice synthesized through a translator that stripped away all inflection. "Human leadership," it said. "I am Executor Vethkral of the Ketheri Directorate. Your outer colonies now fall under Directorate protection. Compliance will ensure survival. Resistance will be dismantled." There it was. Not conquered. Not enslaved. Protected. The Ketheri always used that word. It sounded benevolent. It justified annihilation. Rourke did not respond immediately. He let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable, but not insulting. The Ketheri valued efficiency, and wasted time irritated them. That irritation was useful. "Executor," Rourke said at last, his voice steady, almost conversational. "You're parked in my defensive perimeter without clearance." A pause. Barely half a second. The alien processed tone, posture, probability. "Your perimeter is irrelevant," Vethkral replied. "Our fleet output exceeds your combined defensive capacity by a factor of 9. This has been calculated." "Has it?" Rourke asked mildly. On a secondary display, unseen by the Ketheri, human analysts watched live telemetry pour in. Energy signatures. Shield harmonics. Microlatency in Ketheri command and control relays. The aliens believed secrecy lay in complexity. Humans had learned long ago that complexity leaked. "Your resistance profile," Vethkral continued, "matches predictive models. You delay while seeking leverage. It will not alter the outcome." Rourke allowed himself a thin smile. "You're right about one thing," he said. "We are delaying." The alien's eyes flickered. "Not emotion. Calculation." "State your counteroffer," Vethkral said. Rourke didn't. Instead, he glanced at the intelligence officer to his left. She gave a nearly imperceptible nod. 3 light-years away, on a marginal system the Ketheri had already flagged for resource restructuring, a human civilian convoy altered course by exactly 2 degrees. It was an insignificant maneuver. A rounding error. Unless you knew why it mattered. Back on the Resolute, Rourke spoke again. "You've reviewed our military assets. Our fleet. Our weapons." "Yes," Vethkral replied. "They are insufficient." "You've reviewed our political divisions. Our inefficiencies. Our internal conflicts." "Yes." "You've even reviewed our history of warfare," Rourke said. "Selective portions of it, anyway." The alien inclined its head slightly. Your species excels at internal conflict. This is not a strength. No, Rourke agreed. It's a side effect. Vethkral's cybernetics pulsed faintly. Clarify. Rourke leaned forward just enough for the camera to catch the lines in his face, the weight of decades spent making decisions that killed people so others could live. You've analyzed how we fight our enemies, he said. You haven't analyzed how we protect our own. Silence again. This time, it was the Ketheri who hesitated. Define own, Vethkral said. Rourke's voice did not change. Family, he said. The word translated imperfectly. The Ketheri language had no true equivalent. Their social units were functional, temporary, dissolved when no longer efficient. Loyalty was contractual. Protection was conditional. Clarification required, the alien said. You're threatening one of our border species, Rourke continued, as if answering a different question. Non-aligned. Low population. Minimal military value. You categorize them as expendable. Yes. They asked us for help, Rourke said. And you declined formal alliance, Vethkral noted. Your records indicate no binding treaty. That's correct, Rourke said. We didn't make them allies. The alien waited, certain now that the human had reached the end of his argument. Rourke looked directly into the camera. We made them family. For the first time since contact, the Ketheri executor did not respond immediately. Somewhere deep in the directorate's predictive models, an assumption failed. Not catastrophically. Not yet. Just enough to register as an anomaly. And anomalies, humans knew, were where wars were won. Executive Vethkral did not interrupt. That alone told Admiral Rourke the word had landed harder than any threat. The Ketheri valued prediction above all else. Their fleets moved because probability allowed them to. Their wars ended before they began because outcomes were mathematically resolved in advance. An undefined variable was not merely inconvenient, it was dangerous. Your statement lacks strategic coherence, Vethkral said at last. Clarify the operational relevance of this family designation. Rourke exhaled slowly. Around him, the command deck remained still, disciplined. Every officer understood the moment. This was not diplomacy. It was reconnaissance of the mind. You assess that species as expendable, Rourke said. Low industrial output. No fleet. Limited cybernetics. Correct. You assessed us as pragmatic, Rourke continued. Self-interested. Fragmented. Also correct. Rourke nodded once. Then you made the logical conclusion that we would not risk conflict for them. Vethkral did not deny it. What you missed, Rourke said, is that humans don't calculate value the same way once family is involved. A faint ripple moved across the alien's spinal implants. The Ketheri were running simulations at extreme depth now, recalibrating models that had never required adjustment before. Your species displays contradictory behavior patterns, Vethkral said. You sacrifice efficiency for sentiment. This is exploitable. Usually, Rourke agreed. Not always. The alien's gaze sharpened. Explain. Instead of answering directly, Rourke gestured to the tactical display. A new set of data layers faded in, harmless enough at first glance. Shipping routes. Relay stations. Known Ketheri logistics corridors. You built your empire by isolating systems, Rourke said. Pick one target. Apply pressure. Force compliance. Move on before resistance organizes. Yes. You assumed we'd treat this the same way, Rourke said. One system. One decision. Vethkral said nothing. We don't, Rourke continued. When someone becomes family, the scope changes. On cue, the intelligence officer spoke, her voice controlled but edged with something close to satisfaction. Admiral, confirmation received. Civilian convoy has crossed the threshold. Rourke didn't look away from the screen. Acknowledged. The Ketheri executor noticed the exchange. Clarified the relevance of civilian movement. Rourke finally allowed himself a trace of humor. You really didn't read that part of our history carefully, did you? He tapped a control. The display shifted again. Across 3 sectors, signals bloomed. Human signatures, long dormant. Decommissioned platforms activating. Old defense arrays waking from cold storage. Commercial vessels changing transponder codes with practiced ease. Nothing overtly aggressive. Nothing that violated any treaty. Yet, these assets were categorized as obsolete, Vethkral said. They were, Rourke replied. Until someone threatened our family. The aliens' calculations accelerated. Resource allocation models spiked. Probability curves flattened where certainty had once ruled. You are posturing, Vethkral said. Your fleet remains outmatched. Rourke inclined his head. In a direct exchange, yes. The executors seized on that. Then resistance remains irrational. Rourke's eyes hardened. Only if you think this ends in a direct exchange. A pause. This one lasted longer. The Ketheri did not fear battle. They feared unpredictability. And humans were beginning to look less like a problem to be solved and more like a system that refused to stabilize. Your doctrine relies on decisive engagements, Rourke went on. Clear lines. Defined objectives. You annihilate resistance centers and the rest falls into compliance. Yes. We don't, Rourke said. We complicate. Another signal chimed softly on the deck. Admiral, the intelligence officer said. The border species has acknowledged receipt. They are confused. Rourke smiled faintly. That makes 2 of you. Vethkral's tone sharpened. You are extending protection to a non-aligned species without contractual obligation. This violates rational self-interest. No, Rourke said. It defines it. He leaned forward again, voice low but steady. Once they are family, your threat to them becomes a threat to us. Everywhere. All at once. You cannot sustain that level of commitment, Vethkral said. Your political structures will fracture. Possibly, Rourke said. Eventually. The executor's eyes narrowed. You are admitting weakness. I'm acknowledging reality, Rourke replied. We argue. We fight. We disagree. Right up until someone crosses a line. What line? The alien asked. Rourke didn't answer immediately. He let the silence do the work. The one you just crossed. Deep within Ketheri space, Directorate analysts flagged a growing anomaly. Human communications traffic was increasing, not in volume, but in distribution. Decentralized. Redundant. Difficult to isolate. Not military chatter. Personal. Family networks. You misunderstand the nature of power, Vethkral said, more carefully now. Your emotional bonds make you predictable. Rourke shook his head. They make us relentless. The alien studied him. For the first time, its probability models failed to converge. If conflict escalates, Vethkral said, your losses will be severe. Rourke's expression did not change. They always are. Another pause. Then why proceed? The executor demanded. Rourke's answer was immediate. Because once a human claims you as family, he said, we don't measure cost the way you do. Somewhere between Sol and the threatened system, human assets continued to reposition, not toward a single point, but toward everything the Ketheri assumed was untouchable. And for the first time in its long campaign of calculated domination, the Ketheri Directorate faced an enemy that was not trying to win quickly. They were preparing to endure. The Ketheri did not retreat. They recalibrated. Within minutes of the exchange, Executive Vethkral terminated the open channel and shifted the fleet to what the doctrine defined as a containment posture. To human observers, it looked passive. Minor vector adjustments, shield harmonics cycling through non-standard frequencies, weapons still cold. To anyone who understood Ketheri behavior, it was a warning. They were testing the boundaries of consequence. On the Resolute, Admiral Rourke finally turned away from the display. Status, he said. Containment net forming, the tactical officer replied. They are deploying interdiction fields along the outer lanes. Not enough to trap us, but enough to signal intent. Rourke nodded. They want to see what we do next. And if we do nothing, someone asked. Rourke's jaw tightened slightly. Then they'll assume we're bluffing. That assumption had broken more civilizations than Ketheri weapons ever had. Across human space, something subtle was already unfolding. Not mobilization in the traditional sense. No grand speeches. No dramatic fleet launches. Instead, 1,000 small decisions were being made by people who had not been told what to think, only what was at stake. Civilian captains rerouted cargo without being ordered. Retired engineers logged into old systems they hadn't touched in years. Defense contractors quietly reactivated production lines marked obsolete because they knew exactly why those designs had been shelved. They were cheap, redundant, inelegant, and impossible to fully neutralize. In a modest operations center on Luna, Dr. Miriam Haldane watched the data converge. She was not military. She never had been. Her expertise lay in network theory, how systems behaved under stress, how failures cascaded, how resilience emerged not from strength, but from overlap. They are tightening the net too cleanly, she said to no one in particular. A nearby analyst glanced over. Meaning they think control is binary, Haldane replied. Either they have it, or they don't. She pulled up a projection. Humans don't work that way. Back at the frontier system, the one that Ketheri had labeled expendable, the first Directorate patrol vessels arrived. Sleek, immaculate, overkill by design. They transmitted a standard compliance packet to the local species, complete with calculated assurances of survival. The response they received was irregular. We acknowledge your transmission, the local representative said, visibly tense. We are under human protection. The Ketheri Patrol commander paused. Clarify. No human fleet assets are present. That is correct, the representative said. They said they would come if needed. The patrol commander logged the exchange as psychological manipulation. Humans were known for symbolic gestures. It prepared a routine escalation report. It did not fire. Not yet. On the Resolute, Rourke studied the incoming telemetry. They are waiting for us to show our hand, he said. We're not deploying the fleet, the weapons officer asked. No, Rourke replied. We're deploying uncertainty. He keyed a channel. Begin Phase 2. Across human space, the message propagated, not as a command, but as authorization. Old treaties were invoked. Human-aligned species received quiet updates to encryption protocols. Data caches that had been shared decades ago suddenly became relevant again. Not weapons. Information. Behavioral models. Supply chain vulnerabilities the Ketheri had never bothered to conceal because no one had ever exploited them. Until now. The first disruption hit, without warning. A Ketheri logistics node 3 sectors away from Sol reported a synchronization error. Minor. Correctable. Except the correction failed. Then failed again. Automated systems kicked in, rerouting resources along alternate paths that had been mathematically sound, until human traffic patterns began to interfere in ways no Ketheri algorithm had accounted for. It wasn't sabotage. It was interference. Executor, an analyst reported aboard the Ketheri flagship. Supply latency has increased by 4%. Vethkral did not react. Acceptable variance. Second node reporting similar anomalies. Acceptable. Third node. Vethkral raised a hand. Aggregate. The numbers resolved into a pattern that should not have existed. Not chaos. Not attack. Something worse. Adaptive resistance. They are not targeting assets, an advisor said slowly. They are complicating processes. Vethkral's implants glowed brighter. This is inefficient. Yes, the advisor replied. For us. On the human side, Rourke received the update without comment. He turned to his intelligence officer. Any reaction? Confusion, she said. They are trying to model it. Failing. Rourke allowed himself a brief exhale. Good. Admiral, the tactical officer said, the patrol at the border system is holding position. They haven't advanced. They are waiting for a reason, Rourke said. Let's give them one. He authorized the next move. A single human frigate, outdated, lightly armed, unmistakably alone, jumped into the contested system. It did not power weapons. It did not raise shields beyond safety limits. It transmitted one message, unencrypted. This system is under human protection. The Ketheri patrol commander stared at the display. One ship. No fleet support. No tactical advantage. An irrational gesture. Engage, the weapons officer asked. The commander hesitated. Somewhere in its databanks, the word family still refused to translate cleanly. But the consequences attached to it were becoming uncomfortably clear. Because this was no longer a question of winning. It was a question of how much disruption the humans were willing to endure. And the early evidence suggested the answer was simple. As much as it took. The Ketheri patrol commander delayed engagement for exactly 12 seconds. In Ketheri doctrine, hesitation was recorded as a computational pause, acceptable if justified by incomplete data. This pause, however, did not resolve into clarity. The single human frigate held position, engine steady, weapons dormant, its presence almost insulting in its restraint. One vessel, the weapons officer said. Outdated hull. Minimal firepower. And transmitting openly, the sensor officer added. No deception layers detected. The commander studied the projection. Humans did not deploy assets this way unless they wanted something observed. Hold fire, the commander ordered. Report anomaly. The message rippled upward through Ketheri command structures, flagged not as a threat, but as a deviation. Those were more difficult to classify. Back on the Resolute, Admiral Rourke watched the exchange in silence. The human frigate's captain, a former cargo escort commander nearing retirement, stood by without requesting further orders. That, too, was intentional. They won't fire yet, Rourke said quietly. Because they are uncertain, the tactical officer asked. Because they are disciplined, Rourke replied. And discipline without understanding creates paralysis. Across Ketheri-controlled space, the interference continued to spread. Human actions were not synchronized in ways Ketheri intelligence could isolate. A repair delay here, a shipping reroute there. Independent decisions that, taken alone, were trivial. Taken together, they created drag. Ketheri supply chains were optimized for speed and certainty. They were not built for friction introduced by a species willing to accept inefficiency as a feature. Executive Vethkral reviewed the aggregated data in silence. Its predictive models had stabilized, but only by expanding tolerance thresholds to levels previously deemed unacceptable. This pattern lacks intent, an advisor said carefully. Vethkral corrected him. It lacks central command. The distinction mattered. Decentralized resistance could not be decapitated. It could not be coerced into submission by targeting leadership. It required prolonged engagement. Prolonged engagement required resources. Resources were finite. Human morale indicators. Vethkral asked. Elevated, the advisor replied. Contrary to projections. Vethkral processed that. Explain. They do not appear to be responding to fierce stimuli, the advisor said. Their communications suggest resolve. The word sat uncomfortably in the translation buffer. On Luna, Dr. Haldane observed the same metrics from a different angle. They are adjusting, she said. Which means we're inside their tolerance window. That's bad, an analyst asked. No, Haldane replied. It means they are paying attention. She highlighted a data cluster. Notice how they are protecting high-efficiency nodes. That tells us what they value most. Speed, the analyst said. Control, Haldane corrected. Speed is a tool. Control is the goal. The human frigate in the contested system powered down its main engines. It drifted, vulnerable by any tactical measure. The Kethri patrol commander frowned. They are reducing mobility. Perhaps a mechanical failure, the weapons officer suggested. Or signal, the commander replied. He opened a channel. Human vessel. State your intent. The response came immediately. We're not here to fight, the human captain said. We're here to stay. That is not a valid military objective, the commander said. No, the human replied. It's a promise. The channel closed. The patrol commander reviewed engagement protocols. No hostile action detected. No legal justification for preemptive strike under directorate rules. Firing now would constitute escalation without certainty of outcome. For the first time in its career, the commander felt the weight of a decision that could not be optimized. Back on the Resolute, Rourke received confirmation. They are holding position. Good, he said. So are we. A junior officer frowned. Admiral, with respect, how long can we keep this up? Rourke looked at him. Longer than they think. The truth was less comforting. Human endurance was not infinite. Political pressure was already building. Markets were reacting. Allies were nervous. But humans had endured worse under less clear cause. And this time, the cause had a face. In the border system, the local species watched the human frigate drift silently between them and the Kethri patrol. It made no speeches. It offered no guarantees. It simply remained. That presence mattered more than firepower. Executive Vethkral convened an emergency strategic council. This alone marked a shift. Councils were inefficient. But inefficiency had become unavoidable. Human behavior is inconsistent with submission, Vethkral stated. Then apply force, one counselor suggested. And validate their narrative, another countered. They seek provocation. They seek commitment, Vethkral corrected. And they are willing to incur cost to demonstrate it. The council fell silent. This was not how domination was supposed to unfold. The Kethri did not lose wars, but they avoided those that threatened equilibrium. And equilibrium was now unstable. Back on the human frigate, the captain recorded a short log entry. Not for command. For his family. Still holding, he said simply. Looks like I'll be late. On the Resolute, Rourke watched the stars drift slowly past the viewport. The game was no longer about winning quickly. It was about forcing the Kethri to confront a choice they had never faced. Escalate against an enemy who would not retreat. Or withdraw from a system that humans had claimed as family. Either way, the illusion of inevitability was already gone. The illusion finally broke at the edge of Kethri space. Not with an explosion or declaration of war, but with a delay that should not have existed. A Directorate enforcement fleet, dispatched to reinforce the border patrol, arrived 17 minutes late. The discrepancy was minor by human standards, catastrophic by Kethri ones. Their logistics models allowed for variance measured in microseconds. 17 minutes meant interference had crossed from inconvenience into threat. Executive Vethkral studied the after-action report in silence. The cause was not sabotage. No systems had been breached. No commands altered. The fleet had followed every directive correctly. The problem was that the environment no longer behaved as expected. Human commercial traffic had surged along routes the Kethri had classified as irrelevant. Autonomous maintenance drones, sold legally to dozens of neutral species, were operating at peak capacity, filling bandwidth, creating queue conflicts, introducing decision friction. None of it violated any treaty. None of it justified retaliation. All systems performed within specification, an analyst said carefully. The specification is no longer sufficient. Vethkral absorbed that. The humans have expanded the battle space. Yes, the analyst replied. Without declaring war. That realization carried weight. Wars could be won. Expanded environments had to be endured. On the Resolute, Admiral Rourke received confirmation of the delay. He allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction, not triumph, but validation. They felt that, the intelligence officer said. Yes, Rourke replied. And they don't know how to stop it without proving us right. He turned to the tactical display. The human frigate still drifted in the contested system, unchanged. No reinforcements. No escalation. Just presence. Any movement from the patrol? Rourke asked. They've repositioned, the officer said. Defensive posture. Weapons still cold. Rourke nodded. They are buying time. So are we. The local species had begun to adapt as well. Not militarily, culturally. They broadcast open acknowledgments of human assistance, maintenance crews arriving unannounced, shared encryption keys, medical support dispatched without invoices. None of it was secret. The Ketheri monitored every transmission. Each one reinforced the same narrative. Humans did not protect for advantage. They protected because they had decided to. Executive Vethkral convened the Strategic Council again, this time including analysts from behavioral sciences, a concession rarely made. The humans are signaling permanence, one advisor said. They are embedding themselves socially. That is inefficient, another noted. It is durable, the first counted. Vethkral considered both statements. What is the cost of removal? The answer took longer than expected. Direct military action would succeed tactically, the advisor said. But secondary effects are unpredictable. Human interference would intensify across multiple sectors. And the non-aligned species? Vethkral asked. Likely to resist relocation, the advisor said. Human presence has altered their risk calculus. Vethkral processed that. Humans were not just defending territory. They were changing expectations. Back on Luna, Dr. Haldane watched the same shift from her terminal. They are reaching the point where escalation costs more than withdrawal, she said. That's the goal, an analyst asked. That's one goal, Haldane replied. The other is memory. Memory. If they back down, she said, they remember why. On the border, the Ketheri Patrol Commander received new orders. Not to engage. Not to withdraw. To observe. The human frigate captain noticed the shift immediately. He logged it, then sent a brief message home. Still here, he recorded. They are watching now. He smiled faintly. Being watched meant being acknowledged. On the Resolute, Rourke was informed of the order change. Observation, he repeated. That's new. It means they are reassessing doctrine, the intelligence officer said. Good, Rourke replied. Doctrine breaks before fleets do. A message arrived moments later, unexpected, tightly encrypted. Ketheri origin. Rourke authorized it. Executor Vethkral appeared on the display once more. Its posture was unchanged, but something subtle had shifted. Not deference. Consideration. You have altered the strategic environment, Vethkral said. This outcome was not predicted. Rourke inclined his head. You're adapting. Yes, Vethkral replied. We must determine whether continued pressure yields acceptable returns. And? Rourke asked. And the cost is escalating, Vethkral admitted. Rourke said nothing. You defined this species as family, the executor continued. Does this designation extend indefinitely? Yes, Rourke said. That's how it works. The alien processed the answer longer than before. Your commitment structure is asymmetrical. Rourke smiled thinly. You could call it that. If we withdraw, Vethkral said, will your interference cease? Rourke met its gaze. If you leave them alone, we'll leave you alone. The executor considered the statement. It was not a threat. It was an offer. Conditional. Clear. We will suspend enforcement actions in this system, Vethkral said at last. Pending further analysis. The channel closed. On the command deck, no one cheered. Victories like this were not celebrated. They were absorbed. Is it over? A junior officer asked. Rourke shook his head. No. But it's remembered. Across Ketheri space, new annotations appeared in Directorate archives. Not warnings. Not prohibitions. Observations. Humans, acceptable losses unknown. Commitment thresholds non-linear. Family designation alters strategic calculus. And beneath it, a line added by an analyst who had spent too long studying the data. Avoid forcing humans to prove it twice. The human frigate powered up its engines, but did not leave. Not yet. Family stayed until everyone understood what that meant.